Okay, for the song lyric analysis. Can't decide if I want caps or not. Basic analysis is simply how and why. As in, how do these lines in the song contribute to the overall meaning, tone, message, I guess I could say, or message of the song, right? Or why does the songwriter, I guess we'll just say artist, some songwriters are the singers and vice versa, sometimes not, right? Why does the artist use such and such a metaphor in the chorus, right? Analysis is simply, it's turned into a sentence, might as well capitalize it. Analysis is simply a measure of how and why. How and why. To that end, I like to use the phrase the writer's toolkit the same way that, you know, if I want to build something, I'm gonna use my files and my drills and my sanders and my planer and my saws. And I'm going to keep all of that in hopefully an organized, safe way in a particular area of the garage. And if I set out to write, I'm going to do the same thing. I have to have my mental tools organized, and I have to know where they are. I have to know what each one does, because otherwise I'm going to end up doing a lot more work. The same way that if I didn't have the proper saw, I would end up doing more work to, use something else or have a workaround. So with the writer's toolkit, when it comes to analysis, there are a few, I guess, staple tools that I always use. And one of them is Burke's Pentad. Originally designed to analyze drama on the stage, the pentad is a group of 5, not really aspects, I guess elements in any story. A group of 5 elements found in any story that can help identify, no. There's a group of 5, okay. Looking at the elements of the pentad can help us understand what's going on under the hood of a story. I use a lot of masculine metaphors when I'm teaching because I have taught in a lot of small Oklahoma colleges, and I find that those metaphors work well with my target demographic most often, but also I do a little bit of tinkering and woodworking and whatever, and so I use these masculine metaphors all the time. But pick your metaphor, getting underneath the surface of a story, being able to kind of pick it apart and see what makes it tick, right? And when I say story, it can be an actual written story, or a movie, or a poster, or anything that has meaning and can be analyzed. In our case, song lyrics. I've probably said that a lot. I'll repeat myself frequently. It's not because I don't think that you're listening or won't get it the first time. It's because I forget, but since I've said these things so many times, I forget if in a particular case, in this case, fall of 2021, I've said something the number of times that I want to say it. So I end up saying it like 4 times that many times, which is tiresome, but at least then I know that I've said it. And plus, hearing something important repeated can only help, hopefully, until it drives you nuts. So the pentad is, and I have a graphic that I'll link for you. But you know what? Let's just go ahead and bring it up again. MS Paint. So the pentad is represented usually by an actual pentagram, because a pentad is just any group of 5, right? Pentagon, 5-sided object. Pentagram, a shape with 5, in this case, points. And a pentad is just a group of 5. And Burke's pentad has 5 different elements. And in no particular order, I say no particular order, but I always list them in a certain order, just from habit, and I messed that order up here, and it bothers me. I guess that's what I get for saying no particular order. And we're going to put 1 on each point of the pentagram here. And, you know, I've always seen Burke's pentad represented with a pentagram, I think because it's the quickest version of, you know, putting 5 points and being able to visually kind of arrange it that we have. But it could be probably any shape, as long as it's got 5 points, you know, 1 for each of the terms. And you can see how this originally comes from drama. Sorry, I had to pause for a moment to adjust the sound levels, and naturally I forgot everything that I was saying. You can see how the pentad originally comes from drama, because you have terms like act, as in like Act 1, Act 2, and scene, as in the scene, the scenery that's physically on the stage, you know, the setting. But you can apply these to any text, any story, any movie, any song, music video, whatnot. And the pentad has a rough correlation to the 5 journalistic questions. And in fact, let me grab this. Here we are. It's not really a rough correlation. And you may or may not have heard of the 5 journalistic questions. It's something that you get in English classes of all levels, but let's see. And those are simply who, what, where, why, when, how, right? It's when the reporter runs up on the scene and sticks the microphone in the face of the policeman who's you know, on the scene. These are the questions that the reporter yells, right? Who did it? What happened? How did it happen? When was it? What, you know, why was the bank robbed? So on and so forth, right? So these are the journalistic questions that you want to be part of any good piece of journalism. You want these points to be covered, right? That's the object of journalism, is to report what's going on, right? So there's this rough correlation here between the 5 points of the pentad in these questions. Now there's 6 journalistic questions, and the way that works is scene is both where and when, right? So scene can be you know, some combination of these, or just one or the other. Purpose, of course, is why. The act is what, as in what happened, what was the act or action. The agent is who did it. You can think agent in terms of like a secret agent or a CIA agent. That's a person, right? Well, in this sense, an agent is anyone who has power to act, right? An agent is anyone who has power to act. Now, in a story, that's really any character, because even characters who are slaves or who are imprisoned have some decision-making power over their own small circumstances, right? Even if they have had all this other power, agency taken away from them, they still have some control over their lives, even if it's in a small way. And agency, of course, is how, as in by what power. So if I'm reporting on a natural disaster, like an earthquake, say, then I would say something about how all these buildings were torn down and all these people were killed and such damage happened, and the agency would be, well, an earthquake, right? An earthquake does damage because the earth itself is shaking so violently and shifting so much that everything falls over and gets crushed, right? So in a very simple way, that's agency. If I'm talking about the assassination of JFK, then, the agent would be either the assassin, or we could also be talking about JFK himself, of course. An agent is anyone who is involved in something, right? The agency would be, well, the assassin shot JFK, right? So that's via a firearm, via a bullet, like, via trauma to the body, right? And you can see how scene and act themselves fit in. The ones that really come into play when we're analyzing are purpose and agency. And you'll notice that that's how and why. And that correlates, or corresponds rather, to our definition of analysis, right? How and why is the important stuff. And it's the important stuff because it's something that we can't get just by looking at the scene or just by reading the story about the scene, right? So, you could give me a report on the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, right? The political protest that became a riot, became an attack on a national building, right? We could say, okay, what happened? We could say where and when it happened. We can say who did it, right? They've been able to identify a lot of the people involved, even though many of them had masks and so on and so forth. Now, we could pretty much agree on that. What the reason it becomes controversial is because there's disagreement over this idea of why it was done. Okay, well, it was done because the people doing it believed that the election was rigged or was false, or something illegal was going on. But if that belief is correct, then that's a very different thing than if that belief is incorrect, because there's a riot involved. There's a very large crime involved, right? So purpose, why, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right, is the old cliche. But depending on our perspective or our belief, purpose can change, and agency, how, by what power, well, again, that can change. So, for example, if depending on whose side you're on, you may look at a certain act of violence or an invasion or a treaty or anything, any kind of decision, as either a very good or a very bad thing, right? Or anything in between. So these two, how and why, they tend to vary depending on perspective. And they are therefore worth looking into, because we can't simply read the thing and be like, oh, okay, well, that's it. We're done here. I mean, if we could, then there would be peace in the Middle East. Then nobody would ever have problems with each other, or with crime, or with, any kind, like with money, because we'd all agree on everything, right? But of course we don't, and this is why, because how and why are the variables that really start to get underneath the surface, right? And allow us to really look at something and see what makes it tick, right? So asking these questions can help us see the individual parts of a text in isolation. And that, in turn, can help us see how each part functions to make the whole, right? In our case, we can look at individual verses, the chorus, individual words or rhyme choices, and we can also look at music, pace, as in delivery, like emotional tone of delivery. So if the lyrics are talking about a tragedy, but the delivery is very upbeat and cheerful, then that's maybe jarring. It's certainly unexpected, and it has a very different effect than if the pace and delivery matched the material, right? It was angry or sad. Each of these elements not only shows us something about the text, but once we identify them, we can begin to see how they influence each other. What I mean by that is, if we're looking at the pentad and we are analyzing, say, a Super Bowl, right? Well, again, you know what? All right, Super Bowl 48, whatever. Who? Okay, we named the two teams. When and where? Easy, we can look that up, right? Now, the why and the how, that's probably going to be about who won, right? Because that's the point of watching a football game, is to see who wins and kind of how each team plays and so on and so forth. Now, we can agree that a certain team won and this and such was the score. Again, that's just stuff we can get by reading, the statistics about it. But why may not be as clear cut. For example, maybe the losing team had a really strong offense all season, but suddenly their passing game just fell apart in the Super Bowl. And so they had very few yards from passing, right? And most people think, okay, well, that's why they lost. But maybe, obviously there's other issues involved, right? Maybe the team that won had their own challenges they had to overcome. Maybe the losing team also had other mistakes they made, and some people blame that, right? So we could argue, but this is why dudes talk about sports, right? Because we can argue about individual players or coaches or policies or individual plays that affect the outcome of something. How did that team manage to lose or win? Why did such and such a player, do what he or she did, right? And so, depending on how we look at that, the 5 elements of the pentad will start to influence one another in different ways. What I mean by that is, when you look at song lyrics, let's say it's a song about a breakup, right? There's tons of breakup songs, right? They're either angry or they're sad or they're like, I don't care anymore and I'm over you, right? Whatever. But if we're looking at that, we could say, okay, who's the singer? Okay, the singer's the person who got dumped, or the singer's the person who dumped the other, whatever. When did it happen? Where? Why? And how? Okay, well, those are the interesting ones. And if we look at those, they may change depending on whose perspective we're in, right? So if it's the person who was broken up with, well, maybe they're feeling betrayed, or maybe they're feeling surprised, or very sad, or angry, or whatever, right? So the why for them is going to be very different, and maybe the most important thing, right? If, on the other hand, you're analyzing a song that is about something completely different, then the scene may be the most important. Say the song is about a particular experience that the singer had in a certain part of the world, or a very specific time in their life, right? Well, then the scene, the where and the when, may be the most important thing, and then you can kind of see how that influences each of the other points, because they all have influence on one another. And there's no single right or wrong way to go about saying, okay, for this topic, the agent is most important, or for this topic, the act is the most important, right? There's no right or wrong answer to that. But depending on your topic, you can start to see the way that these things influence one another and begin to come together. So I know that's a lot in terms of just this one element. Most parts of the writer's toolkit are not some big fancy thing like this. It's just something like symbolism or word choice or active voice, like very basic things. This is the reason I'm giving you the entire pentad, the whole thing, is because you can use it to kind of pick apart song lyrics. And the nice thing about song lyrics is, depending on how much material you have to work with, you may have a whole list for like the who of a song, right? Because you've got the singer, but then maybe that you've also got the person that the singer is singing to, if they are singing to a specific person. You may have other characters or groups of people mentioned in the song, right? Also, if you want to be technical about it, even though we're looking at song lyrics, the members of the band of the who perform the song may come into play, because often they collaborate to write lyrics, or they take turns, or even if the drummer doesn't write the lyrics, let's say for example, that the drummer and the songwriter work closely together, and the songwriter doesn't actually write anything until after the drummer has the drum track laid down, which is the case with Tool, for example, objectively the best band on the planet. So you may end up having multiple entries for one point of the star here, and that's fine. And that's kind of the nice thing about song lyrics, is you can kind of be flexible with them. If you think that the who is the most important part, then maybe go with that. If on the other hand, it's a song about a particular place and they describe the place in really cool language, well then maybe that's going to be your focus, right? So start thinking about that in terms of the song that you're going to go with, and the next time we talk, we'll focus on maybe some other ways that we can look at analyzing something in a more like straightforward way.